Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram language design review. And we have a number of topics here today. Should we start on logging object or should we start on snap, which I think will be a lot easier?
We could probably start on Snap unless we get too far
Let's
into the
snap
weeds
to
here.
snap.
Yep. So Snap we've been talking about on and off for a little while. Just as a brief review, Snap's a utility function that lets you effectively snap to values that are close to whatever preset grid you have, working kind of like chop on arbitrary values. And so the last time we talked about it, we decided it was worth adding a third argument that acts as an offset for the grid, effectively like mod does. And that's the subsection there that Danny's added in. And there's a couple things we wanted to take a look at.
Does snap exist already?
It's in prototype builds.
Okay. And what is the default snapping tolerance?
I believe it's the same as chop, Danny. Is that right? If
I'm
Danny's
sorry, I just stepped out to the restroom.
default tolerance for snap, I think, is what, one
I
10 to the
think
minus
it's,
6?
I think it might be -4, but I'd have to check.
Okay.
I think 10 to the
Yeah.
-6 was kind of tight for that function.
Right, which is much, much bigger than chop, which is like 10 to the -10 or thereabouts.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, but the tolerance option here, which chop, does chop have a tolerance option?
It has an option or possibly a second argument. I think it's a second
I
argument.
think it's a second argument, yeah. Which we had looked at doing. Yeah, the delta is the second argument. But since with snap, we want to both define a grid and potentially an offset, then you end up with a whole lot of arguments.
Possible that we should add the possibility of an option for chop as well.
So I know I wasn't invited here for this one, and here's a slightly crazy heretical question. Is a grid that you'd snap to always linear? If I was dragging something on a log plot, would I want some kind of scaling function?
Mm-hmm.
Possibly. And not a crazy idea. I think we've lived without snap for some 4 decades. I think we should get the linear version in before we worry about anything else. But I think the idea of a scaling function is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I certainly haven't thought of it before.
I mean, even in log plots, you're kind of on screen, you're in the linear space, even if the underlying coordinate system isn't.
Right, but this is has no known. I mean, the detents for sliders, which, by the way, how do we do that? There's a way of giving little sort of notches in a slider. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Sliders tend to be quite small, so I'm not sure that.
No, I know, but there's a mechanism for specifying. Oh, in general, jumps to positions given by this. I've never used that, but yes, that's okay. So that's the way that works. So I mean, there's a question of listability for snap.
Yep. So that's if you scroll down a small bit, that's one of our questions about listability and multi-dimensional grids. Danny had kind of been implementing this, looking specifically at the one-dimensional case.
Yes.
And then, there's the question of, is this going to be automatically listable, and how is that going to impact grids that are multidimensional if it's automatically listing? Jose had mentioned there were some similar problems in Geo, and that there are ways around it, but they sometimes require some array gymnastics.
Yes.
Well, fundamentally, the question is whether the array is an outer product array. If it is, then we can convert the problem into the separate dimensions.
Right. Okay, but the issue is something like, Okay, first of all, let's talk about the offset. So I'm not a big fan of this. I'm more of a fan of what happens over here, where, a single number represents offset 0.
Well, but it's really not parallel, right? In Slider, you're
Yeah, I
giving a
know.
range, right? It's a standard iterator-like spec, whereas here it's just the delta.
I would tend to believe that we should have a single argument to specify the grid. And then perhaps in the future we have more complicated forms of grid.
Yeah.
And then a single argument should be able to say, oh, it's a grid of 0.2 steps starting at 0.1.
Well, how would you propose to do that? As a single argument, as opposed to a
Yes,
two-argument form?
some notation. I'm not sure what the notation is, whether a pair or something, but a
Yeah,
single
but
argument. Because
so-
otherwise, if we try to generalize this in the future to more complicated grids, it's going to be difficult to
But
do
what
it.
about the multidimensional case? In other words, is it the case that every number, if the data contains triples, for example,
Mhm.
are we assuming that every XYZ direction has the same snappiness?
Well, I guess the step is the most important one. So,
The step is definitely, I mean, yes, the offset also, but we should not assume that they have the same snappiness.
Well, in that case, they've got to have a list for that
Right,
argument.
right. I mean, we can allow a single argument to be,
What does mod do in
interpreted.
that regard?
What is what
Mod
do?
is listable. Mod is listable. So if I say mod 5623,
Good luck. It's not,
it's listable.
yeah. I mean, it's modding separately. That's all.
Yeah.
No, well, no, it's listable, right?
Yeah.
Which is a much more precise thing.
Right. Whereas this would have to be
it's literally has attribute listable.
right. Whereas
Yes.
this would have to be a threaded listability
Right.
if it did that. So in other words, it would be a snap. Right. You asked that here.
I'm looking at the function coordinate bounds array, which has similar problem of defining grids. And so here, I think the most general case is the next to last, in which you have the ranges, steps, and offsets. And they can be multidimensional, but by having multiple of them.
Into.
Yes, so that's a symbol that is supposed to be able to do like subdivide, like specifying how many steps you want instead of the dx.
Yes. We should probably have a little LCC discussion about how more generally whether that can be done more generally. I never use this function, even though it obviously is quite useful.
Yeah, it's a general grid generator.
And by the way, don't forget to cross-reference snap and it.
I mean, so in the multi-dimensional case, I mean, wouldn't you in general want to be able to specify a lattice that you snap to?
Yes. Yeah, with horrible stuff with unit vectors and so on. Lattice vectors, rather. That's way too complicated. And look, snap is a heuristic thing anyway. I mean, snapping to some weird, diamond lattice in 3D is crazy. Just crazy. Because it's really just snapping. Look, the main snapping coordinates does make sense. And I can imagine fractional snapping of coordinates. That is, you've got, the x-axis is in units of hundreds and the y-axis is in units of 0.1, and you don't want to snap the same numerical amount in each direction, if you get what I'm
Right.
saying.
Yep.
But also, shouldn't the tolerance depend on the snap? Right? In other words, if the snappy, if the if the snap grid is dx, the tolerance should be some number times dx.
Right. I agree. I would start by snapping as much as possible. And then if you want to restrict it, then you use the tolerance argument or option.
Have an automatic tolerance that is either some fraction of dx or just...
Okay, fine. So it's like 10 to the minus 4 dx or something. Or is it 10 to the minus 3 dx, perhaps?
I
Right,
think
but-
it was one of those.
Right, but if you have multiples, then do you specify, right? Is that 0.01 an absolute or a fractional tolerance?
Fractional of the dx, I
Okay.
think.
Okay, but
That's what
that's
it
not
should
how
be.
does tolerance work in other cases? Is that how it works in other cases?
It usually does work as a relative.
Okay, fine.
So for,
I
SVD,
think
I'm
usually
not
is way too
sure.
strong a word, but there are certainly cases for both. Certainly in a
Okay,
lot of
all right.
matrix things, that's right, because
Okay.
it has to be based on.
Let's just go through this. So snap of x1, y1, blah, blah, blah. And then here, it's dx, dy, right? So it's threaded in. Do we agree?
Yep.
What happens if there's another level of list here? How does it, should it interpret it as threaded so that it goes down to the lowest level?
I think so. That's what I
Right,
would
fine.
expect.
Okay, fine.
so it has to match the
Lowest
dimension of the dx dy.
level. At the lowest level.
Yes.
But, okay, which makes it hard to specify a common dx just standalone if you have a multidimensional.
Well, you can have a single dx, but you can't have a dx and a dy. If it's a single dx there, then that just
Yeah.
applies to everything.
Right, but
But
it's hard to distinguish between what you're treating as threadable and what the dimension you're treating as a dimension of the input. Because you can't match it to the dx comma dy to give you that dimension.
I didn't understand that. I mean, this is, in this thing, it's got dimensions, and it's blah times blah times blah times n, where n, the last dimension, better agree with the length of this vector.
And if it's not a vector,
then it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
Well,
It's just a
if it's
numeric
just a
value.
dx, it just goes all the way down to the bottom.
okay. I guess what I'm stuck on is how do you tell the difference between the dimension we're working in and what we're supposed to thread over on the first argument?
You're threading at -1, right? You're going to the deepest level.
You're asking if this was a list of x, it's like the difference between in density plot or something of giving the list x1, x11, y11. No, sorry, you see what I'm saying? The full array plot like thing versus a bunch of xy pairs. Is that what you're thinking about?
I mean, Danny, why is this any different from any listable function where if one argument is listy and the other is scalar, then it will always work. And if both are listy, then they need to match.
I guess it probably isn't. I'm only having trouble figuring out how I know what is listy meant to
Okay,
be
I
listy
think it's
versus
going to be okay.
dimension.
I think it's going to be okay. It
I
isn't
will
constrained.
talk to people here,
Okay, all right,
when we get back to it and find out
All
what
right,
it is.
and then there's an offset here. There's an OX, OY, if that's the or just a single offset. And then
Right.
there's a tolerance option. Okay, just going down here. Other data types. Oh my. What the heck is this? Is this snap to country?
It's giving, I guess, we had started to spec this out in a previous meeting and didn't get very far into it, but we had said, with geopositions, there's a couple of different scenarios. You might say, I've got these positions, and if they're within some tolerance of being in either extended geographic region or within
Let me give a
some,
real scenario.
Yep.
Okay. You've got positions of houses,
Mhm.
and some of them are in the ocean, right near the country.
Right.
Do you want to snap them to the country?
And with extended regions, it's going to be hard. Where is the snap position? Are we snapping everything inside the United States to whatever the central location we
No.
use is, just
I think
closest
this is
point
a
on the
very
boundary?
complicated operation. I don't
Right.
think we
Right,
should
right.
deal with this in the first
That
instance.
doesn't
Okay.
feel like snapping. That's more like clipping.
Yes.
Mm.
But snapping, the thing that I'm describing is the thing where the boundary was slightly wrong, but there
Mhm.
was something obviously silly about it, like the house is stuck in the ocean type thing.
Right.
Mm.
Or the
Yeah, I'm
population
thinking
of
of
fish is in the middle of a city or something. I think it's a complicated corner case. I think it's the kind of thing that for which maybe somebody makes a WFR that does that, and we see how it actually works.
okay.
I think for time, I don't really understand that either, because we're
So
either
yeah, I think the time example I'm thinking of is, when you're using timestamps that fall really close to day transitions. They're plus or minus a little bit in machine values, but you have some timestamps that are falling within the day. You may want to have like certain tolerances where you're saying, oh, if it's close enough, if we're 3 milliseconds off midnight, we can just snap to midnight. That's close enough.
I don't think it's the right thing to do, because I think the main thing that you get with snap grids, why do you use a snap grid with numbers? Well, answer, you're either trying to make a label a plot or something, and you don't want 0.500001.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I
or
think
you're
this should
trying to
be.
line things up in a nice way. And I just don't see that for dates. Maybe I'm missing something. I mean,
I think for dates it should be like snap to seconds or
Mhm.
snap to minutes.
Yeah. And we already have the ability
why isn't
to
that just
effectively,
round?
yeah, I mean, they were data object with different granularity will do that.
Does round work with dates?
Day round does. I mean, round itself doesn't, because you need to specify what granularity you're using, and it'd be weird to stick a granularity into round itself.
Well, no, round does have a granularity. It has a second argument, which is a granularity.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I was thinking
Worth
just in
looking at.
terms of the named calendar granularities, but
Well, day, I don't see what's wrong
yeah.
with that. I
Right,
mean, I think
but well, yes, but what would one argument round do? And why do we have day round if we're just going to overload round?
because we didn't think of overloading round. But yeah, I think it's a minor story. Okay, I don't think we have an obvious thing to do with dates with Snap, so I think we shouldn't
Okay.
worry
Yeah,
about it.
we'll leave the more complicated data structures to be revisited
Okay.
when we have this down.
Let's go to logging.
All right.
Into the forest.
Right. There's a variety of topics. I kind of John had sent some feedback, and I had pulled some things together. Right now with the options arguments. Right now, I've provisionally renamed the old option that was target structure to persistence, because we're trying to use the persistence location tags to specify for name
Do
alignment.
other things have an option persistence?
There is not currently one. I couldn't find any functions where we
Well, all of the persistent stuff is experimental, so why would other functions adopt it?
Yeah, okay.
yeah, and I mean there are a number of persistence functions that take a persistence location string as an argument, but not as an option. And so we don't have a pre-existing option that says the persistence location should be cloud or.
Okay, there is a generated asset location that exists in a bunch of functions.
Mhm.
Just kind of the analogous thing here. And I think some of the reporting functions, like it would be good to look in this options stuff. We have all these functions for generate report and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have a way of saying where the report goes and all that kind of thing.
Isn't that a required argument?
Yeah.
What is it called? Generate report.
Report generate.
Nope.
Mm.
Document generator and so on.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at those. Generate output type.
There are probably some things here like delivery function,
Mm-hmm.
which are relevant. Okay.
Wait,
So
so
this is the
going.
question of where does the log go, basically.
Yep.
Right, which in generate document is an optional argument.
Okay. I mean, in basically the answer to where does the log go is it could be just displayed on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I just like to point out that in the case of a command line, you could want the log to go to standard error or something like this.
Yeah, we could target a stream. So if you look at the ref page for persistence location, I basically set up logging object to allow any of those modulo front end as a target.
Okay.
So there's kernel session basically means a session variable. Front end session we don't have a good notion of. But
Okay.
no,
I'm just making the point that I'm not sure it's quite a persistence location because some of the things are distinctly not persistent. Like you want it sent to standard error because you're going to have it in a pipe. You don't want the logging to go to the pipe. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um,
It could be logging target
I
specifically.
think that's something like that.
Okay.
Yes. Logging. I wouldn't say target logging destination.
Yeah. And I guess there's two components of that. One is what kind of location, if you say I want this to generate a file, but I haven't pre-generated the file, or I want to log to this specific file, we could say that you have to, if you want to just make a file, say, logging destination goes to create file.
Yes,
to me,
I
the
don't see.
primary.
Otherwise, how are you going to know where the file is? If the thing auto creates a file, how do you know where it is?
Well, right now the location gets embedded in the logging object and an extractable copy. Yeah.
Okay. I remind me what the basic. Okay, so hold on. So let's look. This should be logging level.
Yep, that's the first subpoint there is that
Okay.
we had said log level last time, but I think keeping logging for all of the logging related things makes sense. So I'll change that.
Logging elements will be a list of elements to include in the log.
Yep. So by default, we include timestamp and data. You may also want log level or tags, or you may want, I think one of the things John pointed out is you may, if you're generating like a server log, you may want requester,
Yes.
UUID or something.
What is the handlers? What is the thing that tells you what things you're going to be given to the handler function? What do we call that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Handler functions keys.
Handler functions keys. Okay.
I mean, that's because one thing I don't completely know. I mean, we might be as if we're writing out. So, should we think of a log conceptually as a tabular, which is what you get back from a logging object, right?
Yeah. Conceptually, I think it makes sense. We don't use that as the intermediate storage system because insertion into tabulars isn't trivial. But yeah, I think
understand.
you basically want a schema for the log that says this is the data that every entry should have, and that should be consistent.
Exactly. So essentially, it's the keys.
Yep. Yeah, that's probably better name. And there's going to be some common keys, and there may be cases where you want user-defined keys, and I'm less sure of how we'd specify that.
Right. But I mean, in the case of a tabular, we have notions of schemas and things. But basically, in a tabular, the keys in a tabular are the keys of each association in the tabular, right?
Yes, that's my understanding at least.
Okay. But okay, fine. So let's look at some of these.
Going back to the target structure, I'm worried it's sort of muddling two things that are linked, which is what action you perform in order to write a piece of information to a log versus information on where that is. So obviously those things are linked together. If you're writing to a file, it implies append as the action. But even within the file, you're going to have choices when you think about log management of, am I just going to grow this file forever, or am I going to start a fresh file every day? So you get a daily file. So there might be some kind of way of describing the location that is subtly different than just saying file that you might want to give information
so that's
about.
an interesting thing. Is the question is kind of
automatic rotation.
Yeah.
And I felt fairly strongly from my experience that I want arbitrary function here as one of the options, because if I've got a database application, I might want to write an SQL insert command that is how I actually put it into the place I really want it, completely separate from anything you will prepare for me.
Okay.
Because I need to know my table and my column names if I want to do that. And
okay, but so it's kind of a delivery function or something. It's not quite delivery. What do we call it in data bins? We have the same issue of adding something to a data bin.
Believe data bin
we just have data bin add, don't we?
Yeah, data bin add just runs synchronously.
Okay.
At least I think that's what Bob said last time we had talked about it. Like that's one of the immediate problems I ran into with this. If you have synchronous logging for all inputs and you do something like writing to the cloud, that means every time you hit a log expression, there's a lot of overhead. So like there are method options in the logging. That's one of the questions in there is whether the method is.
I think by default we should do it asynchronously. The thing should spool out the log. It shouldn't be something where you have to wait for every log entry to be delivered.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of potential defaults that are not synchronous, of either batching or.
What is the name of the system we use, like in Wolfram Alpha for log? It's not Kafka. It's one of these other. What is it called? The thing that we use that delivers asynchronously delivering logs.
I'm not sure offhand, but I can certainly follow up on that.
Here's a question. What the heck happens with parallel jobs? With running things in parallel and adding logging? That's something we're going to have to deal with. Like what machine, that's one of the keys, has to be what machine it's coming from, which kernel it's coming from.
Yeah,
and it should work. You should be able to just have a logging inside one of the parallel processors, and it should just work to send it all to the same log.
Yeah, if they're all pointing at the same log, then we have to deal with, I guess, it's okay if the log has insertions that have timestamps that are potentially out of order, because the timestamps indicate what the logged time is, but not necessarily the right time.
Yes.
That's something to think about.
Yes. Look, I think one of the things is that fundamentally, much like handler function keys, conceptually, you're writing a great big association every time
Mhm.
you write a log entry.
Yep.
Now, for efficiency, you might decide to only ask for some of those keys to be there. But conceptually, it's got a whole bunch of keys it can put in there to include the machine name,
Yeah.
the date object, etc.
Yeah, and we can have some
Okay.
predefined ones when you say, this log object is following an Apache log or a log4j log. It will know what keys are typically used there, but you could customize also.
Yes. Well, how do you do that? I mean, we would say, look, we could say something like logging format, and then we say Apache log.
Yeah, we had talked last time about log
That's
object.
too weird. That's actually too weird because what you want for an Apache log, if you want an Apache log, it's going to go in a file.
Mm,
And it would be useful to be able to write in Apache log format. Okay, so
See, I thought the whole point was that the data object was going to be independent of, oh, sorry, the logging object was going to be independent of this, right? And then you could export this to whatever you
fair
wanted.
point, fair point. But I think we are going to want something where in real time, as the log accumulates, it is an Apache log.
yeah, I think there are there a small number of properties or options that are associated with the logged wrapper of whatever you're logging. Typically it's going to be your log level and maybe some tags. The log object itself is going to have a collection of more properties that tell it, what this logs is tied to on a file system or in the cloud, what sort of elements it wants to include if we're not including all of them by default, what timestamp format it may be using, and then the activating wrapper with logging to, begin logging, etc., is going to have a small set of options again, like what log level it's activating and potentially what method it's using to collect the logged options.
I want to come back to John's point, which
Okay.
is, one thing we can do is just say file blah blah blah. That's the log destination. Local object blah blah blah. Right? Cloud object
Yep.
blah blah blah. But you're saying that potentially, so you either give the cloud object pre-created, or you say cloud object open close, in which case a cloud object will be created at that time, right?
Yes.
And that cloud object will then be recorded in the logging object.
Yep.
Now, John is saying that he wants something which is, look, I think we say logging insertion function, and it's usually automatic. But if you want to give something which takes the association and just does whatever the heck you want with it, then you use the logging insertion function.
And I'm thinking that it would have the keys that are the keys that are provided by, I've lost a bit where you wrote it down now, but
so it would just
the
get
elements.
The logging
this
keys.
thing would get the association, would get a single row of the tabular, right? I.e. the association, which is that row of the tabular. Or it could perhaps be a tabular row or something like that if you want it to be. And then you can do whatever you want with it. You can take out the keys you want, you can put it in whatever format you want, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a good mental model for it.
And then each one of these destinations, okay, so
They kind of, each destination implies a default logging insert function.
Right. Logging destination, either logging location or logging destination. And then one of those could be standard error, which is going to be pretty obscure in a front end, but logging destination, I think logging destination is better than logging location.
So if I want to
It
fully
did say,
take
yeah.
all manual control of that, I would use logging destination goes to none and then write my own logging insertion function.
Yeah, logging insertion function is going to lose logging destination. So logging destination can be set to, elephant or something. It doesn't matter because you can,
Yeah.
it might or might not use it.
So actually, another one of the keys that's available to logging insertion function is the logging destination
Exactly.
option value.
Yes.
I think that makes sense.
Well, maybe so. Although it's a row of the tabular, and I think it's a little weird if one of the keys there is at every stage is logging destination.
Well, only if I choose to write that, but I'm just saying the function would have that available to it. So if I wanted to have some weird way of writing a special format into files,
Yeah, all
then
right.
I can still change the file destination by changing logging destination.
By the way, the logging destination should be able to be a list, so it can go to multiple places.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. You can both have a single log object that goes to multiple destinations, or you can have multiple log objects that are doing their own things too.
Yes. Now, in terms of this logging format of where you put, I mean, I think what one could do is one could say logging insertion function arrow Apache log, perhaps.
Yeah, the one I don't like as much would be to have some sort of lookup function that says, log format lookup Apache, and it spits back out some logging insertion
No, I
function.
don't think that makes sense. I mean, I think logging insertion function, I don't know if that's right. I think it might be better because this is a different level of user to have just a logging format, Apache log.
Yeah, there's going to be some set of users that say, here is my file, it's an Apache log, just do everything for me. And some level of users are going to want to custom curate a schema. They're going to want to have a special handler function for insertion, covering both of them.
Let's just, okay. So logging object, that's the target, with logging. So logged looks like logged of expr. That's the minimal version, right?
Yep. That is the thing I want logged.
Yes. Logged of, no, I can't do this of having a sub value, can I? How do I do logged with options? It's just logged of expr comma options.
Yes, comma options.
Okay. So then what does with logging does?
That is our activator. So any logged expression inside with logging will fire and both return.
So logged on its own does nothing.
Right.
But with logging on the outside does something, and it too has options.
Correct. So they should, for the most part, be parallel options to what's in logged. So logged, my log level is debug, and with logging, I'm including all debug and higher level logs, or I guess lower level logs.
Does logged have a second argument, which is essentially its tag?
It does not currently, but that was one of the questions is do we want a tag as an argument or an option?
I think it's useful to have it as an argument.
And we
The
could
pity
have...
it can't be a sub value, but...
Yeah.
So maybe this is a good point to bring in my top use of the version of this that I wrote for myself, which is that I have a couple of utility functions, the most useful of which is log if failure. So anything that I think might go wrong, I use an operator form that is log if failure tag, and I just stick it on the front like an echo. And if the thing goes wrong, the tag gets written to my log file. And if I ever see a failure log, then I just search on that tag and I'm on the right line in code that went wrong. So that kind of prefix form, prefix operated form is it's like littering your code with echoes. You don't have to break the code; you just slap it on the front end.
Well, that's what this is doing as well. But you're saying only log if, I mean, it's like confirm quiet.
Yeah, so this was my model, is that there's these confirm, there's these 4 confirm functions. They actually make quite good analogies for things you might want to use as logging utilities. So logged is just write this whatever, but this would be the opposite actually. So you'd want the opposite of confirm quiet, because it's kind of like log if message.
Right.
There's confirm is the equivalent of my log if failure. I don't know if we really need the kind of confirm by and the confirm match equivalent, but I do sometimes say in my code, log this if it doesn't. At some point, you can just write the code, of course, because these are all similar, variants of the same underlying function. So it's a judgment of when it's useful to have a name versus writing one extra line of code every time,
Yeah,
or writing your own utility.
messy. I mean,
but that kind of log on failure is really good for debugging, particularly on web applications where you weren't there when it went wrong, so you have no idea what led to it.
Stepping back a half second, for if we wanted to have a sub-value version, would it make sense to do like what we did with echo labeled and have a logged labeled? It's a little cumbersome to have 2 different logging heads, but
it's useful for echo.
it is useful for echo, and so I was wondering if
I don't think it's bad to have, if it is not.
Is that for the tag? Sorry,
Yeah.
is that for the tag?
Yeah, it's using the labeled variant would be tagged, so I guess logs tagged maybe, or
Yeah.
And with my one, I've never found a comfortable mix of the 2 different common uses. One is, I just want to know this piece of code was hit. It was never supposed to get here. Tell me if it ever does. Versus well, if you did get here, I'd really like to see the expression of a bunch of variables that would help me to figure out why I got here. And 2 argument operator forms, do they really work? I don't know.
Well, you're saying that, okay, so here's the thing.
The lazy thing, all I want is a tag. I hit this point in the code.
Right, I understand. But what you also want is what gets written. In other words, that you could give something which would write a whole association of stuff.
Yeah, but
that's not evaluated.
Oh, sorry, expression is the thing that evaluates, yes. Okay. So that might be some variables from, obviously you can put the tag in that full data payload, but then it starts getting a bit fiddly.
No, I don't think you want that. I think you want the tag to be a separate thing. But then you want something here, which is another key. Look, I think what you want here is basically
I just have a data key in mind where I can just say data goes to and then say XYZ, whatever it is I'm interested in.
Okay, but it's like my key goes to blah, 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 or something. You can add, right. Yeah, I see. Or you could just have a data here, and that would turn into something like the logged data key goes to data in the association.
Yeah.
So that will be a standard thing in the association is logged data, which is the 3rd argument for logged. You might want it without the tag, though. Okay, but your next point is that you want something okay, let's just review use cases. So in the case of echo.
So in the case of echo, the second argument is really a label, not a tag. But if we extend that, then the 3rd argument is a function.
That does what? The like echo function. It does the same as what echo function does with a sub value.
That's why echo has 2 different operator forms. It has one operator form where you specify the tag and has one operator form where you specify the function.
I have to say those are fairly useful. I mean, logged function would then be the thing that what it puts in the log
It is f of expr for the logged data.
Yes. I don't know. The point about echo is that you see it right there. The point about the log, if you really want to do that, you should use sow and reap and so on. If you really want to have something that is tightly programmatic, why not use sow and reap? This log thing is more like what roughly happened. I'm not convinced that the logged function makes sense. But I take the point that you want to do contingent logging if a condition is satisfied.
Yeah, to me, the two use cases of logging are kind of how busy is my app? I just want to see traffic going through it. And the other is this sort of debugging thing of there's a bunch of things that if they ever happen, I want to know about them.
Okay, there's another case of this, okay, which is in compute services. Logs should by default throw the thing into the log that you can see of the compute services output.
That's a good point.
That would be super
Well,
useful.
that's a bit like my comment about how if you're using Web Engine, you've got Docker, in a container, you've got Docker logs, which will give you everything Apache had to say, but the Mathematica stuff isn't in there, so that should be another target. So I've got one combined log of Tomcat starting up and Mathematica saying stuff happened. And
right, so that's a Web Engine use case, and then there's also the compute services use case, which may be very similar. But then there's a kind
in a
of
way, it's a bit
one.
like what you had of sending to standard out, that sometimes you just want to piggyback on a mechanism that's already there.
Yes. I mean, logged when, this contingent logging is an important idea. Because otherwise you get all kinds of crud in the logs that you don't really want to see. I mean, I could imagine that's what with confirm, we had a bunch of tag names, but we turned that into confirm, quiet, confirm, by, etc. So this is probably the same kind of thing where we initially would think logged when yeah, it's kind of logged on message. Is that the main case? Logged when you generate a message?
And log on failure, like confirm. So you've got confirm and confirm quiet. They're the two main cases for me, I think, to have analogs to.
I think logged when is going to be useful with a function. This is analogous to the by. These names aren't quite right. Failure, return to failure, message, generated a message, and you applied function to expert and something was wrong, which is the analog confirm by. What about the dovetailing this with the exception mechanism? I'm bringing up a bunch of things that this has to connect to.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are going to be pipelines where you want to basically say, log anything that comes up in the exception framework. And I think that's kind of that would be so we have the notion of like looks like that version's slightly old. But we have the notion of like a system log object that you can activate by saying begin logging, and then any logged will automatically fire when it's encountered in the main loop and go into the session log. And what I had figured is that there would be some sort of activation mechanism similarly to say, begin exception logging or something like that. That said, there may be a handful of billion things we have that automatically log messages, automatically log exceptions that are encountered, so various other things that are normal side effect events or side effect heavy events that we have in the framework.
Right.
And so I think we've talked about most of these already.
Yes.
Yeah, so cleanup we haven't talked about a ton. I think John mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but
Well,
being able to,
rotating logs, cleaning
Yep.
up.
Mhm.
I mean,
The problem is that as soon as you get into things that are not standard things like a file,
Mhm.
then you end up having to have potentially elaborate ways of describing how you rotate a log or how you delete things.
Mhm.
right. But the problem is,
But they do feel like useful things to be able to manage the scale of your log and the recentness. So you don't end up with machines running out of disk space because you neglected the logs.
we've done things like this with data bins, and we need to figure out how logging can go to a data bin.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly looked at that as being a logging destination. Let's just say data bin or this particular data bin.
Yes. Um. Okay. Well, we should probably wrap up for today, but the cleanup, I'm just trying to think. What, rotate the logs every day. I'm thinking what would actually be the useful thing to do there. Truncate the logs from older.
Yeah, to me, the two main ideas might be that I never want this log to get older or bigger than a certain size. So it just kind of drops the oldest rows. And the other is
Yeah.
that you might want to say, right, let's start a new log. It's a new day, new log, but you might still want to say and keep up to 60 days worth of old logs. But you could argue that that's something to be done as some kind of separate cleanup operation.
I would think
Once
so. I mean, log pruning, we could have something where,
it might be another utility function that knows what your formats are to be able to say prune logs and examines a disk and deletes a bunch of
well, it
stuff.
might be a wrapper for that when you define the logging destination, you
Yeah.
could say logging. Okay, so a fuller form might be destination arrow. Let's say destination file blah blah blah.
Should file take string slots, backtick date? That could be part of the information that this thing has to provide.
Yes, I mean there's a pruning policy, and I think there's I mean we could call it here logging destination could be called destination template. Right, there's another thing. If you want to do that, you give a template there as opposed to the actual raw destination. And the pruning policy would be something that if it can be applied to that type of object, then it would do it.
Yeah.
So it'd just be ignored if I had a pruning policy, but I've done my own custom stuff. It would just go, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Now, in a logging destination like this, where you say, we could just do insertion function here. We wouldn't have to have a separate option. We would just have that as part of this whole thing.
Yep.
It's true.
Potentially. All right, we should wrap this up now.
Okay. Yep.
But we're making progress, guys.
Okay, I think it's coming together pretty reasonably, and I'll work on getting as much of this together as we can so we can get hands-on and see what else shakes out.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks all. Okay,
See you
bye-bye.
soon. Bye.